Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online. Today is Wednesday, March 6th, 2024. I'm Drew Clark, editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. Very excited to welcome three wonderful guests to talk about digital equity and state digital equity plans. But before we get to them, just a couple of housekeeping items, and there's maybe a few more than normal because it's a busy time for many people right now, but for us particularly, here in Washington, we have tomorrow the Broadband Measurement Summit. We care about better broadband, better lives. That's our motto here at Broadband Breakfast. That means higher capacity infrastructure and how we use it. We'll talk a lot about how we use it here today, but it also is about measuring and understanding the data around where broadband is, what quality it comes in, and the speeds, the prices, the reliability. Tomorrow at the Broadband Measurement Summit here in Washington, we're going to be drilling into this topic. We're going to talk about the BEAD challenge process. We're going to be talking about the purpose of mapping beyond BEAD. We're going to be talking about the FCC's broadband nutrition labels, which come into effect just over a month from now for the biggest providers, and 7 months from now for smaller internet service providers. And then we're going to talk about broadband pricing and how we can get a better handle on the role and reality of broadband pricing, which is quite frankly pretty pathetic in the United States compared with other Western countries. So I am really looking forward to the event. We're going to have a representative from FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel's office to kick us off in a keynote speech just after we begin. Doors open at 8:30. Program begins at 9. There is still time to register. Registration is $245. If you want to do the webcast option, it is also available for just $35. And go to the page. I will post in the messages here in just a moment. It's across the top of Broadband Breakfast, Broadband Measurement, the Broadband Measurement Summit. And speaking of the Measurement Summit, this comes at a time that we've just relaunched Broadband Breakfast. We are really pleased, and I'm going to take just a split second or two, maybe a split minute or two to share my screen and to show you kind of, let's just say, walk you through a few aspects of the new Broadband Breakfast. We have relaunched about a month ago. The new Broadband Breakfast has the same quality stories and events, but because we've added some we hope great features, we wanted to just kind of guide you through a little bit about this, because we've really relaunched the Broadband Breakfast community and the Broadband Breakfast Club in a big way. So just the About page tells a little bit about us. The homepage is always changing with the latest news, always posting news on better broadband, better lives. Topics just gives you a snapshot of the broadband infrastructure related topics, from data to funding to BEAD, fiber, wireless, rural deployment, universal service, spectrum. We've got about 40 topics all told here. And then we get to broadband's impact, right? How it matters. What does it do for people's lives from a digital inclusion perspective, from education, healthcare, public safety, telework, democratization. These are sort of what we view as the impact of broadband. We also care quite a bit about net neutrality and privacy and rules and regulations governing them at the FCC and in the states, and as well smart cities, innovation, their role in the economy. And so this page, this topics, gives you a quick snapshot of the different things that we cover. But we also want to highlight the Broadband Live page, right? This is right across the top. Every week we do an event. Here we are, State Digital Equity Plans. Next week, Quantum Computing and Broadband. All the older ones are also shown on this page. And we have free expert opinions. Our Broadband Live events and our expert opinions are free for anyone, no login necessary. But what we have done is we have encouraged people to join the broadband community, right? And so you join the community, it's free. And when you sign up for free, you get free access to all of our live online events. You can make comments and start discussions in the community. You get our free daily newsletter. You can read 10 or more articles a month. for free on Broadband Breakfast, and you can read all of the expert opinions, and you can even customize your newsletters to see the particular ones you want to receive. And then for those who'd like to join the Broadband Breakfast Club, I'm logged in, so you can see the thanks it gives me for being a member. You get access to all of our in-person events, the videos from our in-person events. You also get a $100 discount. So you join the Broadband Breakfast Club, you get $100 off the $245 price of attending the Broadband Measurement Summit. You get the premium content, all of our premium content, all of our in-person events. And if you, for example, go to this events page here, you can see our Broadband Measurement Summit. We've just announced we're going to do a big push for it in the next couple of days, the California Broadband Summit in June, and digital infrastructure investment in September. So these are all items that we hope you'll spend time viewing and getting to know through your Broadband Breakfast community membership. Thank you for letting me walk through that. And now I'm going to turn to our panel for this event. Oh, one more thing. I'll go ahead and open up to our panel, but we also want to give a shout out to the sponsors of the Broadband Breakfast. We would not be able to do our free programming that we have done now for 4 years. We're coming up on the fourth year anniversary of the pandemic, which is what prompted it. And so I want to give a thanks to Utopia Fiber, to Broadband.money, to Comcast, to SmartWave Technologies, Ookla, to Wesco, Coos Systems, the Community Broadband Networks Initiative of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, the California Emerging Technology Fund, BroadbandToolkit.com, Google Fiber, Broadband Now, Michael Baker International, and DCS Technologies as well. So thank you to the sponsors. So now let's turn to our topic today. Today, we're going to talk about state digital equity plans. And we have representatives from the states of Maine, Pennsylvania, and New York. First up to speak will be Maggie Drummond-Ball, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Maine Connectivity Authority. We've had Maine Connectivity Authority officials on many times. So Megan, thank you. Maggie, thank you for continuing that tradition and bringing your area of expertise to our topic here today. She has held this position at Maine Connectivity Authority for almost 2 years, since May 2022, and leads the digital equity planning process for the state, and also authored the Maine Digital Equity Plan, which NTI accepted last month. So really looking forward to hearing from you, Maggie, about what a great example of a leading state like Maine has been doing. So really excited to hear from you first. And following Maggie, we're going to hear from Julia Brinjak. I hope I said that right, Julia. Julia is the Digital Equity Program Manager for the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority. And she has been in public service for more than a decade with some very interesting roles, including Director of Policy for the Pennsylvania Department of Aging and the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. And so, again, a lot of great, deep state-based knowledge, and look forward to understanding how you got into this world of broadband, and how and the role you play as the Digital Equity Program Manager for Pennsylvania's Broadband Development Authority. And then batting cleanup will be Megan McDermott. Thank you, Megan, for joining us from a rainy New York City. Megan is the Assistant Vice President for Digital Equity in New York State's Connect All office. And as I understand it, Megan, you lead the expansion of the state's digital equity portfolio. You bring 2 decades of experience in public policy, nonprofit, philanthropy, and education, and really want to understand how you have kind of built on your work leading digital inclusion initiatives for the city of New York to the state focus that you're in right now. So with those intros, let's turn it over to you, Maggie, to tell us a little bit. And Please let me know if you have any difficulty sharing the screen. Certainly just go ahead and do that, and we will hear what you have to say. Thank you for take it away.
All right. I have a little difficulty sharing my screen. Oh, did we get it?
Yep, it's working.
Okay, great. Great to be with you. Thanks, Drew, for that introduction. And I'll just start by saying it's so nice we're holding this event during Women's History Month, and that I get to share the stage with women leaders in digital equity and broadband from around the country. It feels like nice timing for you to have a panel that is entirely made up of women. So thank you for thinking of that. As Drew mentioned, joined Maine Connectivity Authority almost 2 years ago, and it feels like a blink of an eye, as I know it does to most of our broadband and digital equity staff around the country who are doing this work. I came to the broadband office from a role at the Maine Community Foundation, which is the only community foundation in Maine, and I was working on initiatives to support entrepreneurship and innovation at that time. And of course, quickly stumbled into the challenge of high-speed internet access for rural entrepreneurs across the state of Maine, and that led to launching a broadband and digital equity initiative at the Community Foundation, which is how I met all of our colleagues at the Maine Connectivity Authority, and got drawn into this vortex of our broadband office. So I'll say for me personally, this issue really hits home because I grew up in a very small, tiny town in Western Maine that has a population of about 50 people. And of course, we didn't have internet access, and my parents were small business owners. So I experienced as a kid watching them join the digital age with their business, and the sort of growth and expansion of opportunity because of that. And then I was also a college student who was maybe not entirely prepared for college and realized that I didn't have a lot of digital skills going into that experience. And so for me, the effort to ensure that other Maine students don't have that lack of confidence in their digital skills going into higher education and other opportunities is part of the driving mission that makes this personal for me. Within the Maine Connectivity Authority, just so I can orient folks on how our digital equity work sits next to everything else.
And Maine, Maggie,
Yeah.
just to interject,
Yeah.
make sure that we're not seeing any new pages. So I don't know if you've advanced. There we go. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
I was talking so much about myself, and I didn't have a slide about myself. So
okay. But now we see there's a problem. So great.
There's a problem. So within the Maine Connectivity Authority, we have a staff of, I believe it's just over 20 now, and which has been our effort to increase capacity to manage particularly the infrastructure funding that is coming. But I work with a team of folks who are managing all of the partnerships and sort of non-infrastructure focused programming. That includes our community and regional partnerships director, director of economic development and workforce, state agency partnerships, and our digital equity manager. So we have a team of folks who are thinking about those strategic partnerships to help ensure maximum impact from our infrastructure investment. So I'm happy to answer questions about the structure of that if and when we get there. In terms of Maine, I just thought I would tell you a little bit about the situation in Maine, sort of how we created our digital equity plan, what's in it in very brief terms, what we're doing now, and kind of what we see as some of those essential challenges that are certainly at play for us and I suspect for many other states. Maine, for those of you who haven't been to our wonderful state, I hope you'll come. It's a very rugged, remote terrain that has been difficult traditionally to build infrastructure to reach all of the parts of this amazing place, and to do that in an effective and efficient way. We also are the oldest state in the nation, so we have a significant population that did not grow up using technology and are not digital natives. And we also have relatively modest incomes and state GDP. And most of us live in small rural communities that have limited resources. There's really one significant size city relative to the definition of city in Maine, which has a sort of population of a little over 65,000. So in terms of our scale, we're just very remote, and our overall population about 1.3 million. So the problem in Maine, when we look at just access to broadband, we're looking at approximately 75,000 locations that will be BEAD eligible, so that those most critical no connection locations and then the unserved locations. And for folks that like to look at it in a different way, we sort of put it in a chart. But 5.6% of our locations are those no connection locations, and then 6.3% or so of those unserved locations. So a good number of places for us to reach through our BEAD work moving forward. And, you know, beyond thinking about access, as we really started to look into our digital equity challenges overall, we found affordability is a challenge really for Mainers generally, and it's a significant challenge for the covered populations that are the focus through the Digital Equity Act. We saw covered populations that had significantly less confidence in almost all of the digital skills areas that we did surveys around. Certainly found that there were a number of folks who have difficulty affording devices, tend to really cite a device, internet-capable device as a barrier, and not having enough devices in the household, as I know so many of us experienced during COVID. And just limited resources for digital skills training and technical support. Most folks would say, you know, my technical support is my family, my coworker, my grandchild, and just not a lot of awareness of those resources that we do have in Maine to support digital inclusion. We also found almost universal concern about internet safety, which I'm sure many other states are also experiencing, and just a lack of confidence and awareness of the tools that we need to stay safe online. And then, of course, difficulty navigating our online government resources and resources generally, and then finding government resources and processes in the right languages. All of those things, I'm sure, and I know that other states experienced and found. A few things that we also were really encouraged by as we went through the digital equity planning process in Maine. We had some significant strengths to build from. And this is a part of our planning process that was really exciting, that I enjoyed. We've had a long history of community-driven broadband in Maine, which I think helps us because we have lots of engaged communities that are not just thinking about their infrastructure, but they're also thinking about that broadband connection for what? What do they want the impact of that connection to be? And I think that's a great place for us to start as we're doing our digital equity work. We also have some core digital inclusion partners that are just significant strengths, both in the digital skills, digital navigators arena, and also we have a significant device refurbishment partner that we are really excited to work with. And networks of opportunity is what we call them in our digital equity plan, but these are organizations that are working really closely with those populations that are most impacted by the digital divide. And we think there's significant opportunity to work with those organizations as we begin to implement our digital equity plan. And then lastly, I just think there's a balance in Maine between even though our investments have been modest throughout the years, we've had a balance between our infrastructure investment and digital inclusion. Senator King, former Governor King, started the laptop initiative in 2001 that really started to connect kids to technology and leverage our education system to get kids using technology in the middle school years. And then we had a significant campaign during the pandemic to connect kids at home through devices and hotspots. And that was an all hands on deck sort of effort with philanthropy and lots of agencies coming together. And that all of that sort of blended to create Maine Connectivity Authority at the right time to do this work on behalf of the state to be a really flexible and proactive broadband office. So how we created the plan, I know I'm going to go over time, so I'm going to skip through some of this, which I think is very similar to how other states did this work. We had a significant strength with our partners, so we brought together stakeholder groups and partner groups to really participate in the process at every stage. And we combined our BEAD and digital equity planning process so that the outreach wasn't redundant, but was happening in a way that we could do it more efficiently and integrate these two plans together. Throughout the process of creating the plan, we employed digital equity survey. We did lots of focus groups and community meetings. Our regional and tribal partners, which is 13 partners supporting different regions of the state and our tribal communities, developed plans and coalitions that were all inputs into the state plan. We did the asset inventory, as many did, lots of advertising and stakeholder outreach. And then we capped our planning process with what was essentially the first annual digital equity workshop, where we brought all those partners together to say, here's everything we've learned. Here's what we think needs to be in the plan. Now help us sort of tear this apart and refine it and put it in the right order. And so that was kind of the capping event of our planning process. And just the emphasis on the support from the regional and tribal partners, which extended and expanded MCA's capacity to reach folks with over 180 coalition partners brought together in the regions and 650 interviews done with individuals who were impacted by the digital divide or organizations that work directly with them. So what's in the plan? We've identified 5 critical strategies for the state of Maine. The first is just putting some of those basic building blocks in place, which includes, having a functioning and healthy digital equity coalition, ensuring that we get our online asset inventory tool up and running so people can find the resources they need. There are a couple of examples. Really leveraging our partnerships to reach places and people with our digital inclusion programming and supports, focusing on affordability, which included, of course, a significant effort around ACP enrollment, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. That's one of the challenges we'll face. But we also focused on thinking about connecting folks who live in affordable housing in Maine as another key piece of that strategy. And then, of course, just statewide education and information campaigns. This is namely around internet safety, but also device donation and refurbishment is a key piece here. And then lastly, our strategy to really sustain and grow the effort over time includes raising additional funds for a digital equity fund that would be more permanent and match our federal funding, and looking at policy changes and education of our policymakers so that we can sustain some of this in the long term. These
Wonderful.
are, yep, go ahead, Drew. Am I going way over time?
Oh, I'm just, let's get some other perspectives in, but
okay.
If you can just final thoughts here.
Okay. So we'll share these slides after so folks can look at them.
Yeah, we'll post them on the page.
A couple of things we're doing. We don't want to wait. Of course, one of the challenges the states face right now is we haven't seen the notice of funding opportunity for state capacity funds to implement our plans. We haven't seen the notice of funding opportunity for the competitive grant fund that folks will be able to apply for. So we're working to begin implementation this year. We're working on connectivity hub grants. We've got regional and tribal partners doing digital inclusion work. And we're launching some pilot programs, including in affordable housing and boosting the capacity for digital skills and device refurbishment. So working to keep the momentum going throughout this year while we wait for that funding to come into play. And just wanted to share some of those essential challenges I think that are facing the states. We have, of course, a level of urgency to really take advantage of this moment when we're making a generational investment in infrastructure, but also having the opportunity to fund programs around digital equity. I think for us in Maine, we're feeling like we have relatively limited resources. We expect our allocation for digital equity to be somewhere around 13 million. And we need to figure out a way to make that springboard into keeping this digital inclusion and digital equity work going long term. Significant unknowns around the timeline and the details of the implementation funding. I think those are real challenges for the states. And they're just really figuring out how to maintain a focus on digital equity over the long term, and sort of take what we're doing now in the short term and make it sustainable. So that's it for me. I'll stop sharing. Sorry, I was so talking. I was really trying to talk fast, but
well, no, and thanks for laying out so much, and that will hopefully make it easier for the others. So let's turn to you, Julia. Over to you to tell us more about what Pennsylvania is doing on the digital equity front.
Sure, I can certainly be brief because Maggie really did cover a lot of things that are pretty unanimous across states, the way we did stakeholder engagement work and how we were tasked as states to really do bottom-up development of our plans by listening to our communities and to our populations to build these plans. So my background, Drew mentioned, I served as policy director at Department of Aging and at the Department of Banking and Securities here in Pennsylvania. That is an interesting springboard into digital equity work, but maybe less surprising than folks might think. All of the things that we talk about when we're talking about older adults aging in place have a almost direct impact into digital access, whether that's allowing them to age in place at home, decrease loneliness, have better access to services and supports, to health, different health opportunities for monitoring. All of those things have a direct nexus. And then that also plays into the ability to have a device that an older adult could use, or to have training to stay safe and secure and to utilize that device. Banking and securities, I worked with a lot of vulnerable populations around the unbanked, underbanked dilemma, which if you draw a Venn diagram is basically a circle for the unserved, underserved. And as we all know, access to finance and opportunities in finance helps elevate everybody. So it's really trying to get these populations access to the financial services industries, education around lending, education around even having a bank account. Those kind of things really led me into the digital inclusion space, where I am now with the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority. The PBDA was established in 2021, so we're a very new state-related entity. We do answer to a board, which I think makes us slightly different than other states. We have an 11-member board, and 5 of those members have an individual veto. So anytime we have a plan that is up for a vote for passing, if any one of those 5 individual vetoes disagrees, the plan will not pass. So that creates an interesting dynamic when it comes to ensuring all folks at the table are heard and that we're making a plan that works for all Pennsylvanians. We did quite a bit of stakeholder engagement, as Maggie did, and also a big shout out to Maine and Maggie. They were the first digital equity plan that was accepted by the NTIA, and they were absolutely a state that we looked to, and I'm sure many others looked to as an example of how to do this work and how to navigate this process, which was new to a lot of us. One thing that we're particularly proud of in our plan is that we have viewed digital equity as both equity for the end user, those covered populations, as well as equity to access to the funding. We have a provision and strategy in our plan that puts aside a certain portion of our allocation to prioritize small nonprofit entities and walk them through how to apply for a federal grant. Which will help ensure that those entities have access to funding in the future, teach them how auditing works, how application works, and really give that white glove service to folks. So that those smaller nonprofits who are boots on the ground every day have an opportunity to apply for this funding as well. And we have been very specific in integrating BEAD and our CPF dollars, our capital projects fund dollars, into our plans. For example, we have a 20 million digital connectivity program through CPF that will provide $20 million worth of devices. to folks, and we have woven that into our plans for digital equity. And I'm happy to pass it over to Megan.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Julia. And thanks for highlighting the role that Maggie played as the first. I had forgotten that, and that was announced at Net Inclusion conference just about a month ago, a little less than a month ago. So let's turn to you, Megan. Tell us a little bit about your background and New York City and New York State and its approach to digital equity and inclusion. And make sure to, there we go.
Thank you so much, Drew. It really is a pleasure to be on this panel with Maggie and Julia, because hearing about the work, I'm so excited to share the ways in which we align. I do think that the process of stakeholder engagement, the real focus on building capacity from the bottom up towards long-term structural and sustainable change is the goal. So just very inspired to already hear from folks here today. My name is Megan McDermott, AVP for Digital Equity with the Connect All office. For folks who may not be familiar, Connect All is really the place where we are driving forward Governor Hochul's vision to transform New York's digital infrastructure. And so what that means in relationship to digital equity is that it's not siloed. It doesn't exist sort of on its own. It's really an integrated component of the way in which the state is moving forward a variety of initiatives that make infrastructure not just more available, affordable, reliable, but also meaningful in the hands of residents across the state. So there are 5 major areas of work. Certainly the digital equity program is one of them. If we think about that, it really, in my bias, is really the secret sauce. It's what takes all of these infrastructure efforts and moves them not just into availability and expansion, but utility, that daily life piece that Maggie was talking about in terms of what people need, or what Julia was saying about, particularly older adults, and what it means for all of this access to be available in the hands of and on the terms of certainly covered populations most specifically, but for residents across the state. So other pillars of work within the Connect All office are the Affordable Housing Connectivity Program, very much looking at access for low-income housing, public housing, Section 8 housing residents, a Connectivity Innovation Fund, which we are still dreaming forward on, Municipal Infrastructure Program, which really, I think, centers the public ownership, the government ownership of infrastructure in new ways. And then the deployment program, which is really the tie back to BEAD. So at this current stage, Connect All is really tasked with spending down, $1.3 billion worth of funding, but to do that in such a way that is driven by and informed by residents across the state, across our regions and our cities, and to really think about what it means to then provide a plan that is responsive, right? I don't often use this word because it's such a technology word, but literally for us to be in a position to be agile with a variety of dollars towards a variety of needs. So to that end, for the state digital equity plan, there are four major strategies that I'd like to share, because I think what they do specifically for New York is they outline a commitment to developing an ecosystem in recognition of the fact that a lot of digital equity work is going on the ground, has been here for years, but may have not had the opportunity of this moment to really think about catalyzing and leveraging each other's assets and supports, resources, and inside knowledge, right? What is it that a community or a particular covered population needs to make this meaningful? So those, quickly in a nutshell, are really about grounding the investments that will come through both federal and state dollars in what we're calling an asset-based approach. So where is there good work? Where are there relationships that are already strong on the ground? Where are there community-driven input opportunities, and how are coalitions part of that work? Digital equity coalitions were absolutely instrumental to the creation of the state digital equity plan in New York. There's one in every region. We want to strengthen our networks. We want to think about building alignment and awareness. So much exists in the state that we also want to amplify. And then finally, really sharpening this idea of sharpening a digital equity lens, because at the end of the day, investments in infrastructure that will be durable and sustainable and available over time are going to be shaped by ongoing commitments by local partners, residents, regional entities, digital equity coalitions, and just we want to be as responsive as possible, as much as we're thinking about the long game. So on that front, I'll just share similarly to what Julia noted, and also Maggie as well, is that we don't yet have in our hands what the notice of funding opportunity is. We have maybe some sense of what might be expected, but we still have to really work through what that NOFO is going to ask of us for capacity building. And again, thinking through what becomes capacity inside an ecosystem, as opposed to just a delivery of specific one-time opportunity projects, right? I mean, those are important as well because they feed an ecosystem, but we need the ecosystem to be, I think, really driving the design. Once we have that, our goal is to continue working with our critical partners across the state to make sure that our plans are always responsive and iterative as much as possible. Technology is going to change. I really love, Maggie, that you called out for Maine, the way in which digital literacies and other kinds of digital equity principles have to be in play as the technology changes, right? Because we will continue to have leapfrog issues. But where the ecosystem and the investment in that community-based, coalition-based approach is clear, we'll have a close focus on the ground. And the reason, again, I'm stressing this is because, New York State has over 2 million residents, 7.5 million households. Right? We have a lot, and we also have New York City. Like, we have just an incredible amount of diversity in the state with a variety of needs. And so as we think through unserved, underserved, and then strategies related to BEAD that are about building out digital literacies across covered populations that don't exist in a silo, they're very much interdependent. We need to always be engaging with folks who are living it across the state in different ways, like with rural communities, county level, cities, New York City. So with that, I just want to underscore that New York's approach is, I think, very driven towards that long-term, sustainable, integrated approach in which all of the work between BEAD and these other pillars of deployment really require and inform what digital equity can and should be over the long haul. Because ultimately what we're talking about beyond the digital are equity principles and outcomes for any investment. So I will end it there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for laying this all out, each of the three of you. I've got many questions myself, but I want to encourage Q&A, putting questions in the Q&A tab. And one from Amanda Bergson Shalcock asks, how are your offices coordinating with your state departments of labor and or education on the digital skills piece of the work? Can we hear from each of you, Maggie, Julia, and Megan?
Sure. We're working closely with both Department of Labor and Department of Education, and particularly adult education in those areas. A couple of key places where we're really seeing synergy. One is around integrating the workforce strategies. So we did a study to better understand, especially relative to BEAD, what we need to do to increase capacity for deploying infrastructure within the broadband workforce. And so we're working closely with Department of Labor and other agencies to ensure that our workforce strategy is connected to the clean energy workforce strategy and the other areas that we're really trying to grow the workforce in Maine. And we have a workforce advisory group specifically to help advise that effort. The other place that we're working, one is in our Connectivity Hub grant program. This is funded, as Julia mentioned, this idea of really braiding funding together. Our capital projects funding that we received for multi-use facilities. We're working on investing in community anchor institutions that include that workforce component. So it's giving us a lot of partnership opportunities with our Department of Labor colleagues and other organizations doing digital skills in relation to workforce development. Those grants will be awarded a little bit later this summer. And then lastly, we have a really interesting project in one of our regions where our regional and tribal partner is closely working with the adult education programs in this rural and remote region and the libraries. So they're kind of creating a model that we can really learn from and hopefully scale, that brings the adult education program very directly into the digital inclusion work across the region. Something that we're looking at really closely.
Julia and Megan.
Sure. So with our board structure, we actually have 4 subcommittees. One of them is focused exclusively on workforce, and that also integrates digital equity components. We hired a workforce specialist who does workforce and digital equity. She's right out of labor and industry, and she helped create some of the materials that Pennsylvania L&I uses now around digital skills training. So we went straight to find an expert to bring them in on staff. We're a staff of 11. So I think that shows that we take that particular piece of this very seriously in such a small staff that we went and sought out that skill set. Additionally, we're in an interesting situation where in the new administration with the Shapiro administration, most agencies are sort of redoing their plans. So we have been pretty deliberate about ensuring, one, everybody knows we exist, and 2, integrating our work in digital equity considerations into the building of other state plans. And that includes labor and industry and our Department of Education. And I also serve on committees for those entities as they build their plans, especially around adult education and other workforce considerations. So we're pretty integrated into those areas.
Okay. Megan, do you want to add anything on that question?
No, I mean, I think it's, again, very similar. I mean, what you're hearing across the board is that we're finding ways to keep building our capacities and our dollars by integrating conversations and need and being very clear that we can't do this alone, and we certainly can't do it in a silo. So in that sense, Department of Labor, education, all of these things are very deeply tied. And I will add that Connect All actually sits within the Empire State Development Corporation. So the real focus on economic development and its relationship to work and digital equity being one way to achieve that is very palpable in the design. I would also just quickly amend, not 2 million, 20 million residents for New York, just in case I misstated.
Okay. Megan, just could you speak, and I love the 5 pillars you laid out, but Connect All, what is the official connection between this agency, Connect All, which is in the Empire State Development Authority, and the State Broadband Office? Are you a part of the State Broadband Office, or is it kind of parallel to it?
We are the State Broadband Office.
Got it.
So in that sense, ESD, or Empire State Development Corporation, is very much a quasi-state entity. So that's how we're able to be, in effect, a bridge.
Okay.
Very intentional, again, by design, to make sure that we were reaching as many of the possible constituents and stakeholders across government, as well as across the state.
I want to pick up on something Maggie, raised at the start about online safety and how that sort of ties into digital equity generally. And just, this is on my bio, but I served as a state broadband officer during, I guess, era 1.0, right, under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, state broadband offices under the State Broadband Initiative. And the program wasn't identical to BEAD. It was different, in fact, but there was a similarity in the sense of we had to have a holistic view of the role of mapping, the role of infrastructure, and the role of equity and adoption. And in that era, 10, 12, 13 years ago, infrastructure, everyone said, we need infrastructure. There was not the same concern about big tech, social media, and the like as there is today. Today, infrastructure, we need infrastructure. That's kind of a bipartisan thing. It was then, it is now. But there's a much more political bent to the concerns about social media in particular. And I know that maybe that's not exactly what you were getting at, Maggie, but could again, let's just take each of the 3 of you. How do you view this role of internet safety and how that translates into the digital equity work that the 3 of you are doing?
Yeah, I feel sorry because I keep talking first.
Okay, that's fine.
I wonder if we need to pass it around a little. say, I think for us, this is and all the states, this is a significant concern, right? We're really focusing on vulnerable populations, under-resourced communities, and giving them more access to technology and the ability and skills and confidence to use it to their benefit. So obviously it would not be to the benefit of Mainers to not be safe online when we're increasing access to technology. So we heard a lot about these concerns during the digital equity planning process. We were really interested of some of the models and resources that people draw on. Our local news media in Maine is a significant resource for awareness. It was one of the few resources that people could mention. And we also saw some really interesting partnerships, for example, between one of our housing authorities and the local police department, really focusing on regular communication and awareness and education for older adults living in this affordable housing community. So I think there's some things we have to build on, but it simply has to be an essential part of our work, and it will be a sort of statewide concerted campaign as outlined in our plan, bringing all the partners and resources together to coordinate on that effort. There's some things to build from, but I think it has to be a significant focus.
Julia and Megan, how do you view this issue?
Well, my banking background is going to show. This is something that keeps me up at night. Giving vulnerable populations access to all the great things that broadband provides is something we should all be doing, but it comes with pitfalls. And being clear about what those pitfalls are, being clear about what resources exist for education, to make sure that you're not, for example, a victim of a scam. I saw that a lot at the Department of Banking and Securities across the board with these vulnerable populations. I will also point out that everyone thinks older adults are the population that is scammed most often. That's actually not true anymore. I believe it's millennials is the generation scammed most often. So it affects everybody. And then also we're very deliberate in our plan around creating resources for mental health. Around if we're going to give folks access, they need to understand that things like addiction to social media, cyberbullying, all these things can exist, especially when folks get into things like anonymous forums. So we want to be pretty clear and give folks resources to that. We also heard a lot, in particular, from less tech-savvy parents who are really worried about what their children are doing as schooling moves online, and they just want the awareness to be able to understand, like even what apps their kids are using, and even be able to recognize apps that are legitimate school apps versus other things that could get those kids in trouble. So we heard a lot about this desire to be a little bit more tech savvy and have greater protections for using the internet.
Megan?
Yeah, very similar. 87% of respondents to Connect All survey regarding concerns and issues related to digital equity noted cybersecurity and privacy. And I think very much in line with what Julia shared, there's a need for us to be able to amplify and support general awareness about, I think you said pitfalls, right? Not just the benefits that come with all this new access, but also the difficulties that different communities will face. Like the intersection of covered populations, we also know that people look for information differently, they process information differently, they need support around these issues in multiple languages. We need it in plain language, not just tech jargon. I mean, all the things, particularly for folks who might be using assistive technologies, where and how we diversify also the way in which cybersecurity and data privacy is supported and taught and made available to folks, I think is a key part of, then again, localizing. This is not just something that's out there sitting on a shelf or as named as a concern, but really demonstrates progress in the way in which people feel more confident and taking ownership and power online.
I want to ask Julie a question first this time. So let's talk about digital navigators. Like Dan Smith asks, what is the pay rate for digital navigators? Aaron Lorandos builds on to follow up on this. Are there remote virtual digital navigators? Are they all in person? Who are digital navigators and how do you kind of see them being a part of a digital equity plan? Julia.
I mean, digital navigators are critical. They're the ones who are boots on the ground, helping people learn how to use the internet, use devices, and get access to everything online. I will say one of the things Pennsylvania is interested in doing, and this has pivoted a little bit since we submitted our plan, we want to have a uniform definition for what digital navigation is if you're going to apply to us for funding. There needs to be a general understanding of what digital navigators provide. And it can't just be existing to sign someone up for an internet service. They should be able to provide other tech assistance, teach people how to like log into a web portal, for example. We do want to standardize what that looks like. And are supportive of even a national model of what that looks like. We had in our plan that we wanted to prioritize paid digital navigation. I don't have pay rates in front of me, but they're all across the board. And we actually got some significant pushback on that particular piece because of how often volunteer digital navigators are used. And there was fear that if we prioritize paid digital navigation, that those programs would suffer with a lower access to that funding. So what that tells you is that there isn't a standardization and it comes in multiple different models, which means that it's going to be incumbent on us to really look into those models and see what's working for particular communities. And maybe it's not a one size fits all approach.
Great. Any of you, do others want to weigh in on digital navigators? Maggie, Megan?
Yeah, I would add a couple things, check plus to everything Julia said. And we have seen that our digital navigators, which we've been growing in number in Maine, are driving demand for digital skills training, and our capacity to provide that digital skills training has not caught up yet. So something we're really trying to reconcile. We also do see that as we standardize what digital navigator positions look like, sometimes there are restrictions, for example, on providing tech support because they might not want to touch somebody's device. And sometimes we really need someone who's just able to touch the device, work with someone, be one-on-one to do that kind of support. And we have seen in Maine, we have some of our tribal partners are deploying tribal digital navigators, but sort of restructuring the way that those positions were working to both provide one-on-one tech support and also to allow those navigators to go into people's homes, which for the tribal members was a really important part of that service and that digital navigation. So I definitely think there's a lot of exploration to do around what these models are and how we deploy them effectively.
Cool. Feel free to let's keep going. We got a number of questions I want to get in more and pick up. If you don't get you in one round, we get you another. Reg Weiser asks, what percentage of the panelists' population are unserved or underserved, live in MDUs, multiple dwelling units? Speak a little bit about that. We're kind of got a little bit of a more Northeast focus with our panel today. How does the MDU kind of space merge with digital with digital equity in your planning process? So let Megan go first for this one.
So for this one, I don't have numbers in front of me, but what I can share is that the Affordable Housing Connectivity Program is very much designed to address the needs of low-income residents in Section 8 and public housing and low-income housing. And so the value of that program is really to help us, I think, start mapping and addressing the needs across units, but also communities. So I would like to come back with more numbers. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Maggie, Julia, do you want to weigh in?
Oh, go ahead, Maggie.
We can't get our order right here. I also don't have numbers in front of me, although my colleague Tanya, thank you for being here, did chime in the chat that we do have fairly high rate, over 73% of home ownership, owner occupied in Maine. But this is one of the significant areas for us to dig deeper on in Maine, and it's really at the intersection of our BEAD and infrastructure deployment and our digital equity plan. So we're working on both pilot program to really understand the scale of digital inclusion supports that are needed in the affordable housing setting and what's most effective, and looking at those connectivity solutions that go beyond getting the connection to pass by the MDU on the street and get it into units or in a really high quality Wi-Fi connection. So we've outlined a affordable housing connectivity program. We're looking closely at the other states' existing programs, and it will be a big focus for us moving forward.
That's also something I don't have numbers on in front of me. We have been working with Education Superhighway with some presentations around their apartment Wi-Fi, their numbers here in Pennsylvania. We work with quite a few housing authorities as well, and the Pennsylvania Housing and Finance Authority to better understand where MDUs are, who's occupying them, how those intersect with covered populations and other digital needs beyond what Maggie said, just are they a broadband serviceable location that's on the route for our infrastructure deployment? It's something that we need to build into the plan and, as Maggie said, understand it a little bit better.
So before our final question, I want to do a lightning round here. Leighton Olson, my good friend Leighton Olson, raises the point about workforce hubs, visualization centers, and community colleges. So it's kind of community colleges, the question there. Dan Smith asks about where refurbished devices are used, and if anyone wants to chime in on that. And Doris Thomas asks about just kind of encouraging affordable housing and digital equity innovation fund in Philadelphia and New York entrepreneurs. So do any of you want to chime in on these questions that have been raised? Oh, and we have another one here about New England agencies and sharing knowledge. So let's let each of you weigh in before I ask my final question of each of you.
I mean, I would definitely take the refurbishers. One of the things that Pennsylvania is committed to is creating a website link to all the refurbishers that are operating in Pennsylvania and updating that regularly. We've also committed to making connections between high technology turnover industries and refurbishers to see, and entities like Digitunity who work in this space to try to match the need, like an entity that has a need for refurbished devices with entities that are trying to get rid of their devices. And they have a really great portal that they use to do that. But we're trying to step into the space to connect those people. For example, I had a call before this panel about a credit union who wants to get all their membership to donate all of their devices, because in banking they tend to turn over their devices pretty quickly for security concerns. Some of these laptops may only be 2 years old, and they're trying to. They didn't know that was a thing that they could do, and now they do. And some of that is just letting folks know that these things exist and that they could participate in them.
You want to take one of those, or shall I just go to my last question? Let's give each of you a final opportunity to weigh in on the role of digital equity plans in the BEAD rollout. At this moment, there's challenge processes going on. Well, of course, we're going to be talking about this. In fact, Education Superhighway out of Yenka will be on our panel tomorrow to talk about the BEAD challenge process and the role of BEAD. What do each of you have to kind of share with other state broadband offices or officers or providers in those states with the role that they need to be cognizant of regarding digital equity in this process? And let's go in the same order we started with. So Maggie, Julia, and Megan.
Sure. I think that the most critical thing that we could do right now is ensure that we're talking about digital inclusion and working on digital inclusion programming at the same time that we are deploying infrastructure and really keeping community engagement front and center. So throughout the state-led challenge process, we are working to ensure that our partner organizations understand what this is and why it's important, and that they're able to communicate that to the communities and the consumers and constituents that they work with. I think that we have to keep in mind that we have a very intense focus on the access piece of digital equity right now, but it's part of a bigger circle. of all of those elements of digital equity. And that's the message, I think, for all partners is it's all connected. It's not one thing happens first and ends over here. It's a big circle and you can start anywhere. And we encourage all of our partners to start anywhere on that digital equity mission.
Great. Thank you. Julia.
One of the things I'm very proud of is that in our org chart, I sit at the exact same level and authority as our infrastructure program manager, whose name is Jesse. We are in constant meetings together. He is regularly attends different digital equity stakeholder groups to present on things like the challenge process. We are trying to ensure that digital equity practitioners are as involved as ISPs and some other industry folks in understanding what BEAD is, what the rollout looks like, and how they can participate, since nonprofits are going to be an entity that's allowed to be part of the challenge process. So weaving that in, being intentional about not just putting industry with folks is really important to us. And it's reflected in also how we prioritize our office and the staffing there. So I think that has been critical, and also reframing digital equity as adoption when you're talking to ISPs. This is phenomenal for ISPs. We are going to hopefully integrate things that allows people to be subscribers, right? So just reframing some of the discussion as like equity is not over here. It's literally critical to increasing, return on investment for some of this BEAD build out. It's an absolutely critical component of it.
Thank you. Megan, we're going to give you the last word here today.
Yeah, I'm going to make it quick. One thing I'm very excited about with New York State's approach to the challenge process is that we've also opened up a public comment opportunity so that along with eligible entities, there's going to be folks who can weigh in from their perspective, and that while that's not part of the formal process, it will go towards serving and counting towards our understanding of where there's need in the mapping and in the analysis. So very excited for that, and also to share, like, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're trying to make sure that everything we do following public comment and public engagement is also accessible.
Well, thank you again to our panelists, Maggie Drummond-Ball, Julia Brinjak, and Megan McDermott. Don't forget to sign up for the Broadband Measurement Summit, 8:30, doors open. The program begins at 9 on broadbandbreakfast.com. On behalf of everyone, see you tomorrow and also next Wednesday. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.